India is doing better, but could do a lot more. So, increase the productivity of India. Rich people, middle people, poor people. Of GDP in tax revenue, but if you look at China, should it be 20%, 25%?
नमस्कार, अमरुजाला.com पर आपका स्वागत है। आपके साथ मैं हूं आदर्श झा। देखिए, किसी भी देश को आगे बढ़ाने में उसके आर्थिक विकास की गति और किस तरीके से समावेश उसमें समानताओं का हो रहा है, क्योंकि सबसे बड़ी बात है कि एक चर्चा लगातार हम सुनते रहे हैं कि अमीर और अमीर होते जा रहे हैं, गरीब और गरीब होते जा रहे हैं, और भारत जैसा देश जो लगातार अपनी आर्थिक गति को और बढ़ाने की कोशिश कर रहा है और ज़्यादा आर्थिक क्षेत्र में अचीव करने की कोशिश कर रहा है, दुनिया में अपनी एक नई छाप छोड़ने की कोशिश कर रहा है, वहाँ पर ये असमानताएं कितनी बड़ी बाधक हो रही हैं, इसके कारण क्या है और इसको दूर करने के लिए जो कोशिशें हो रही हैं या जो पॉलिसीज़ होनी चाहिए वो किस तरीके से बन रही हैं, और अगर दुनिया के हिसाब से भारत की इकोनॉमी को समझने की कोशिश करें अभी के सिनेरियो में, तो वो किस गति से हम आगे बढ़ रहे हैं और जो दिशा हमारी है वो कितनी सही है, ये जानना और समझना बेहद ज़रूरी हो जाता है। और इसी पर बात करने के लिए हमारे साथ पेरिस स्कूल ऑफ इकोनॉमिक्स से प्रोफेसर थॉमस पिकेटी साहब मौजूद हैं। जाने माने अर्थशास्त्री हैं आप। वेलकम सर, वेलकम टू द अमरुजाला.com. I'll start with the India. First question is mine. I just wanted to know how do you see the current scenario of Indian economy as per GDP, as per inequality, everything. If I mix it up and just wanted to get a gist of it, how do you see in context of the globalization and India? Where do you find India stands?
I think India is doing better, but could do a lot more. So India, I think, could reduce poverty faster and could have faster economic growth by reducing inequality. So, my work as a scholar has been to compare inequality levels across countries, across regions of the world in history. And what we find is that the level of inequality we have in India today, even if we have some uncertainties and about the data and not enough transparency about income tax data, other form of data sources, we can be sure of one thing, which is that India is really a very unequal country. If we look at the share of total income going to the top 10%, the bottom 50%, in particular the bottom 50% share in India is almost twice as small as in richer countries, not only Europe or North America, but also China, for instance. So, and I think this very high level of inequality in India is due to insufficient investment in public infrastructure, education, health. So, I know the government is making some effort and, they don't like criticism, but if we make this comparison with other countries, the truth is that, India could and should do a lot better and will get more inclusive growth, more equality, and also more prosperity at the same time.
Do you think, I just wanted to know, how do you see it? India's growing income inequality impacted its all-over growth, economic development. Do you see it, or can we change it by policies or something else?
We see it definitely, but as you know, the overall level of productivity in India, GDP per hours of work, is still quite low as compared not only to the richer country in the world, but also if you make the comparison with China or other countries which were quite poor 40 or 50 years ago. India is really lagging behind, and I think we require more investment in human capital to bridge that gap. The idea that we can double Indian productivity just by making billionaires richer and business owners more powerful to facilitate layoff. I know there is a discussion in India right now about making firing of workers easier. I don't think the evidence we have suggests that you're going to increase the productivity of India by doing that. I think the key is really investment in the labor force, and the truth is that people at the top of the distribution of wealth and income in India should contribute more to making this investment possible. If you look at very top billionaire in India today, the income they report in the income tax system is like 0.01% of their wealth. You know, they have a wealth in billions or dozens of billions of dollars, and you know their income is in millions of rupees, or you know, well, you know, sometimes a few hundred, but it's just too small, you know, as compared to their wealth. And so you can increase the tax rate from 43% to 90% if you want, but you know, if the tax base, if the income that they report is 0.01% of their wealth, you know, what are you going to do? So you need to have some form of wealth taxation on billionaire, just to make it possible to make them contribute to public services in India. I mean, it's you know, I'm not saying we need complete equality. You know, it's okay to have some poor people, some rich
right
people.
now, what you're saying, I'm just connecting it with your books.
Yeah.
And I've got some references that Capital in 21st Century. You said that there is a winner takes all phenomenon. Is it so? Is it this?
You know, there is improvement everywhere in the distribution, you know, including at the bottom, but the growth is much larger at the top. So, you know, if you take at top billionaires in India, you know, the rise in their wealth has been a lot larger than average GDP growth in India. So let me say it again. You know, I'm not saying you want a complete equality. You know, I think it's okay, you know, to have some rich people, middle people, poor people, as long as everybody is sort of going up at a comparable scale. But you know, if the top is going up 3 times or 5 times faster than the bottom, you know, at some point this cannot continue like this forever. And you know, it will be acceptable if India was starting from a very low inequality level, if India was a very equal country. But you know, from the data we have, India is already much more unequal than pretty much every country we have in the world inequality database. You know, the only exception is maybe South Africa is a bit more unequal than India. But apart from that, India is really at the very top, you know, of the inequality ladder in the world, and this is simply too much.
The way you are saying, I'm just connecting it with some other thing, and I just wanted to talk about population also. Do you see population as a bigger factor or a bigger problem to achieving this goal, especially according to the current scenario, what is there in India?
Well, I think the two are related. You know, the faster India will be able to grow and to improve the living standards of the bottom 50%, and the faster, you know, the demographic transition will go, and India will be able to stabilize its population. That being said, you know, the goal should not be a reduction in population by you know, 30% or 40% like in China, which I think is going to create lots of problems. So the goal should be more stabilization, maybe small decline, but you know, we should be very careful. You know, of not going into the China trajectory, which I think is going to raise you know, incredible challenges for China in the you know, in the second half of the 21st century, and it's actually an asset for India. You know, to try to have a more balanced, you know, demographic with a stabilization rather than a fall. Now, at this stage, of course, the problem is more that the growth is still very substantial. And again, you know, I think improving the you know, investment in the bottom groups of the population is also a way to accelerate this transition.
Okay, but I just wanted to know, you're talking about inequality and bridging the gap. Government is saying that we are working, policies are there, things are being done, but do you see, is it working on the ground, on grassroots level, working, or do you see, do you think there should be some changes, if we can make some changes, that this will be more impactful?
I think it could be a lot more impactful. You know, so you know, the answer to your question is complicated, because yes, there are some progress on the ground. You know, I'm not going to say that everything is going worse and worse all the time, because that would be wrong. But at the same time, we could do a lot better. And just to give you an indicator, you know, it's very difficult to pay for all this infrastructure, public services, with 13 to 14% of GDP in total tax revenue. You know, if you want to pay for everything, the experience from other countries, is that you need more. I mean, I'm not saying that India should become, Sweden with 50% of GDP in tax revenue, but, if you look at China, should it be, 20%, 25%, 30%, these are long-term changes, and it's difficult. Because if you ask more taxation from the middle class, people will disagree. And so this is why this needs to come with tax justice. This needs to come with first, taxation at the very top. If you look at the very, very top of the billionaire list, we want to make sure that they pay, a decent tax as a fraction of their wealth and as a fraction of how much wealth they have been accumulated in the past 10 years. And I think it's very important that the government of India, I ask them, to be more transparent on this. They should say, okay, I mean, they don't need to give names, but they should say, okay, here are the top 100, wealth owners in India. Here is how much they have increased their wealth over the past 10 years. And we sort of know it from, wealth rankings. And here is how much income tax, they have been paying. And I think if they release this data, what we will see is that, the income tax they have paid is just a ridiculously small fraction of how much new wealth they have accumulated. So, I'm not saying that we should take 100% of the wealth, but if the effective tax rate that they have been paying is 1% or less, maybe it could be 10% or 20% or 30%, but, the average taxpayer in India, let alone the upper middle class taxpayer or, small entrepreneur in India, they are paying a lot more than this. So if you don't start by, building some confidence in the system and asking more contribution to those who have more, you will never be able, to bridge the gap and build a social contract where everybody accepts to contribute to this long-term strategy. And again, I would love to be able to say that we don't need more tax revenue. We can do it all with 13% of GDP in tax revenue. But, the historical evidence and the comparative evidence with other countries that we have forces me to say that this is not possible. And that's really a discussion that I think we need to have in India.
Yes, that's true. How do you compare other countries like China, USA and India? And the scenario in India, which we are discussing right now. Not USA, China and other countries, which you see are growing fastly and trying to make changes like India do.
I think 50 years ago, as we know, China was not richer than India. So what went wrong in India and what went better in China? There's a very interesting recent research by Nitin Bharti from India and Li Yang from China, who have put together a lot of historical data on the educational system of China, the educational system of India. And I think the general answer is that India's approach to education historically has been more elitist than China, and probably too elitist, in the sense that it's good to put resources in higher education, but first we should have put a lot more resources in primary, secondary education, and a lot more resources overall. And within higher education, what they find is that there's been so much investment in, for instance, engineering school in China historically as compared to India. So you have to look, at the different curriculum, the resources they receive. And, I think the sort of more inclusive and growth-friendly educational investments that was followed in China is absolutely critical.
Okay, one important thing I just wanted to ask, and maybe last one or two questions. India's approach to taxing the rich and redistributing wealth, how do you see it? We talked a lot about this.
Yeah, to be honest, it's a difficult question for every country, not just India. So, what I was saying earlier, the fact that the top billionaire report very low income as a fraction of their wealth is a problem that we see pretty much everywhere. The solution to this, has to come from looking both at the reported income and at the wealth of individuals, and to use, the wealth also as an indicator of the ability to pay tax. So, I think maybe what India has not done and so much as compared to other countries is to try to use both the income and the wealth as indicators of, citizens' ability to contribute to taxation. I mean, these discussions are always complicated. It's because when it comes to taxation, people get very excited very fast, and everybody feels that they are paying too much as compared to their neighbors and other people. And, I don't have a magic solution to this, but by looking at other countries and at different historical experience, I would say, you need to better monitor income reporting, but you also need to use wealth more often than is currently done in India in order to assess the contributive capacity, the tax capacity of taxpayers.
I just wanted to know, India is a bigger country with a younger population, more younger population currently. If we bridge this gap or keep bridging this gap, how will it change our growth rate, India's growth rate?
Growth rate of population?
No, growth rate, economic growth rate. So if we bridge this inequality gap.
Yeah, well, India will increase its growth rate. Yeah, I think I've said that many times.
Yes. Last one thing I just wanted to know, because we are talking about all the policies and all, what should be done, you said earlier also, but what few steps should be taken at once to as a plan, as a master plan for 5 years, for 6 years, for 10 years, to see the changes? What do you suggest in that way? Well,
I think, in order to invest more resources in public infrastructure, public services, you first need to ask a higher effort at the very top of the distribution. And it's only after you have this first step of sort of trying to convince the country that, the richest are sort of paying a decent share of their income and wealth, that you can try to bring more people into the tax system. So if you look at, the fraction of India's population paying income tax today is around 10% or a bit less than 10%. The experience from other countries is that when you have economic growth and rising income and income going up much faster than inflation, the fraction of people paying income tax should probably gradually increase from 10% to 20 to 30 to 50%. That's what you see in China, and that's what you see in Europe, historically, in North America. In every country that has developed, you start with an income tax, which is really an elite tax, and then as income increase for everybody, you extend the income tax. But let me make clear that this will not be acceptable if you don't start by showing that, the very, very top of the distribution, top 0.01%, is indeed paying their fair share. And it's not just a question of symbol. Although, symbols are important in a country. You need to show that there is some justice, but it's more than a question of symbol, because at the end of the day, there is a lot of money, to contribute at the very top. And what we have shown in a study with Nitin Bharti and Anmol Somanshi is that the tax revenue that the Indian government could get by taxing very top billionaires could have a very significant impact on education budget, health budget at the level of all of India.
थैंक यू सो मच प्रोफेसर पैकेटी फॉर टॉकिंग टू अस. थैंक यू सो मच. आप अर्थशास्त्री प्रोफेसर थॉमस पैकेटी को सुन रहे थे, और देखिए असमानता को लेकर जो बातें होती हैं, जो पॉलिसीज हैं, किस तरीके से काम होना चाहिए, और दुनिया के बाकी जगहों पर क्या हालात हैं, किस तरीके से उनको बदलने की कोशिश हो रही है. वो चाहे टैक्स हो, वेल्थ रिडिस्ट्रीब्यूशन हो, उसको लेकर जो हमारे बीच बहुत सारी चर्चाएं होती है, उसको लेकर पूरी बात उन्होंने कही है. और मुझे लगता है कि इसके बारे में बहुत सारी चीज़ें जो आप जानना चाहते थे प्रोफेसर साहब के जवाब से, आपको उनके जवाब जरूर मिले होंगे. और भी इससे जुड़ी तमाम चीज़ें हम आप तक पहुँचाते रहेंगे, और आप भी देश और दुनिया की हर खबर के लिए amarujala.com पर बने रहिए. धन्यवाद.
अगर आप ये वीडियो YouTube पर देख रहे हैं तो हमारे चैनल को सब्सक्राइब कर बेल आइकन दबाएं, और Facebook पर देख रहे हैं तो हमारे पेज को लाइक करें. 8 मिलियन प्लस सब्सक्राइबर, आपके इस भरोसे के लिए बहुत धन्यवाद.